That is but our first question now is the National Assembly says that it is not a rubber stamp for the executive, and that it has a right to alter budgets that are submitted to it. What is your take on it? Because you have been a governor before, and now you are at the federal level.
Well, I think that in a young democracy like ours, these problems are likely to arise, especially with parliamentarians who are also learning the fine rudiments of parliamentary work. And parliamentary work requires, first duty is representation, the second duty is lawmaking, third duty is of course oversight and all of the ancillary things. But I think clarity is important, because the sense of saying we are not a rubber stamp is perhaps asserting an independent streak under the doctrine of separation of powers. But anybody who has followed the evolution of the principle of separation of powers by Rousseau, Montesquieu, and all of the French philosophers who knows that there's nothing divine about it. I've always made that point. It's not a divine philosophy. It was made by human beings. And therefore, in my view, it is subject to the imperfections of human beings. And I give this example. Separation on its own will not get any of the three arms anywhere. What you see more of is interdependence. And so instead of seeing, therefore, every arm flexing the example of its power, what I want to see more is the power of the example about how to get things done. The executive arm cannot be inaugurated unless the judiciary acts responsibly. So on the day the president is being sworn in, he's at the mercy of the Chief Justice. He can't start his work unless his oath is administered by the CGN. The CGN chooses not to come, or chooses to arrive late, or says that, well, I'm independent, today I don't feel like coming. I think you get the point. Now, when the executive is now inaugurated, Parliament can't start its work until the executive issues the proclamation. So the so-called independence is subject to Parliament executive proclamation. And so if the president now says, or the governor now says, well, I won't issue proclamation, I'm busy, I'm not a rubber stamp, nothing will get done. But I think that we must understand that in a federal example like ours, most of the fine points of conflict and misunderstanding have also often been resolved by the judiciary. And nobody should therefore be afraid to have a judicial interpretation of what are the final limits of the powers that Parliament can exercise during appropriation process. Because appropriation is a very, very important law. It is perhaps after the Constitution, the second most important law a country can have, because that is the law that really affects our day-to-day developmental expectations. Roads, bridges, hospitals, how much money we get, how the economy is doing, GDP, and all of that. So, and most of the tools for planning the appropriation law are in the executive arm. National Bureau of Statistics, National Ministry of Budget and Planning, Federal Inland Revenue Service, Finance, Central Bank, all of them. They are in the executive arm, they are not in the legislative arm. So, if those specialties are there, how much contribution can you really make? I think that it will only fair and reasonable to say we won't push you beyond what is reasonable. Of course, if executive sets an unreasonable standard, there may be some room to say, look, why don't we let us have a look again? But to just unilaterally go and say we increase the budget is not something that I think lies in the remit. Of course, they can reduce. Those are my views. And I don't think that they can sit down and legislate projects that are not federal projects. That would be doing violence to the Constitution. Because there are three arms of government. Three levels of government, pardon me. The local government. They have their functions and responsibilities in the fourth schedule of the Constitution. Markets, parks, primary schools, primary healthcare centers. That's their responsibility. They have local government roads. The state government also has its own responsibility. And it has concurrent responsibilities in some places under the second schedule with the federal government. And then there's this exclusive list, which is the real remit of the federal government. As far as my ministry is concerned, those are federal roads, arterial roads, roads that connect one state to the other. That's what we should be building. Not state roads, not local government roads. So if you now look at my budget, you will find things like motorized borehole, you will find things like primary healthcare center. That is a violation of the Constitution. It shouldn't be in the appropriation law of the federal government. It shouldn't be. So I think we need to have the right person, the arbiter, deciding. If the judiciary then decides that indeed it is the National Assembly that should make the budget and hand it over to the executive to implement, so be it. Then the lines will be clear.
Yes, sir. Some will argue that there's budget defense committee hearings, and that should be enough for that. It becomes useless if after defending your budget, the legislature now tampers with it again. What is your take on that?
It's a good point that you raise. I couldn't seriously argue that a legislator has no input to make in the developmental plan of a nation. I can't make that argument fairly. The question is how and when. And I had cause to appear before a committee of the House of Representatives. And I even presented a paper at their invitation because they were planning to pass a constituency project law and they were doing hearings on the bill. And they were trying to create constituency offices and all of that along these lines. And I said, no, you shouldn't do it. It's not necessary because there are institutional capacities already within our national framework for having these kind of things. One of them is the committee. Now you would ask yourself, when the budget is presented by the president and this committee hearings start, everybody is excited. We're going from one committee room to another committee. You wonder what we were doing there. That is the place where I expect that issues about projects, to have a constituency project, it must be a federal matter. Otherwise, you'll be encroaching into the territory of the state legislature. So if there is a road that is a federal road that affects your constituency, that is where to take it up. If there is a school that is a federal school that affects your constituency or a federal health facility, this is my argument. And because a lot of money is spent on those committee hearings, they provide water, they provide snacks, because we're there for long hours. It's taxpayers' money. And they even pay for TV coverage. That's why you see us. So after all of that is done, you expect that everything will be fine. And that all of the things that you have discussed will be reflected in the output of the budget. But what then happens is that there's another committee called the Appropriation Committee. And I don't know how they brief each other. But you then find out that when your budget returns, it is different from the budget that you discussed and defended. You don't recognize it anymore. So when I was defending my budget, we didn't discuss boreholes, we didn't discuss primary healthcare centers. I have hundreds of them in my budget. I have new routes that are state routes. My overheads haven't gone up. I inherited 200 and something routes when I became minister that we are trying to complete. And so even the right to add something must be in a context of our national development. The context of our current national development is that we have reports from previous administrations showing us that there are thousands of uncompleted projects in Nigeria. If constituencies, federal constituencies and senatorial districts are within states, and states are within Nigeria, those projects must affect one constituency or the other. And I think that in the context of our national development, trying to get out of recession, those must be the things that we want to focus on first. Complete those that have started. Then, even some of the roads, they don't have a design. So they can't be done this year. I would have argued that one of the things we should be doing, we want you to do 10 more new roads or 50 more new roads. And then we say, where are they? They are federal roads. Let's first award this year the contract for their design. So it's a budget item for design, not for the construction of roads. When they are finished, then next year we award them and start, assuming that they are federal roads. And I would advise that it would be helpful that the outcome of committee hearings are summarized into a 1 or 2 page communique, so that they form part of the documents, not just the numbers, that go on to the appropriation committee. And that if any new matter is then raised, it is only fair to call the ministry back to say, we want to do this. But it is totally unfair, after defending your budget before the committee, for the committee to then unilaterally decide that it's going to chop off this, chop off that, and then apply it to areas it hasn't even discussed with you, without considering whether you have the manpower to deal with it or the expertise to deal with it. That is not national development and planning anymore. Even in a court of law, where the judge is the umpire and everything, he cannot decide the case on a matter where he doesn't hear both sides. He can't choose to say, well, you people have fought this case on 4 different issues, but I'm going to decide it on an issue that occurred to me when I got to my chambers. He can't do that.
Thank you, sir.
First, let me say that it's unfortunate that all of these things are happening, and but they are also the result of nature at work. There is increased rainfall. Increased rainfall brings with it benefits and burdens. It brings with it more possibilities for farmers to improve their yield and their harvest. It brings potentially more food supply and more exports, as my colleague in Agric is seeking to achieve. But it also brings the responsibility of flood management and damage to existing infrastructure. It washes off some roads, and all over the world, this is the nightmare season of people in road engineering, rainy season, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in America, whether it's in the Philippines. We see videos of it every day, mudslides, villages washed off, and all of that. So this is what is happening. So we've lost 2 bridges in Niger State, and what we have done is to order emergency procurement for the 2. So our contractors should move to site. I've been in touch with the Commissioner for Niger. I also spoke to the Deputy Governor for Niger State, I think on Monday. Yesterday, which was Thursday, we also had another incident in Michika in Adamawa. So I've called my team to go and assess it and we'll see what we can do in terms of mobilizing people to site. Now, this is part of the argument that I have made during the budget, that you must leave a contingency vote in the budget. And every time we put a contingency vote, without calling us back, they just decide, what is this money for? Bridges? They didn't specify the bridges, just break them up, allot them. But how do you then deal with this? If you budget in a family, there's always a contingency, so that we can respond. And I have labored to make this point clear and acceptable, and I'm not sure that I'm getting across. So it's increasingly difficult to then, when you don't even, you spent 6 months with your team planning how to develop the state. We planned to address first, we had 6 priorities. First priority for roads, high vehicle impact roads, roads leading to and from ports, roads leading to and from agric producing areas, roads leading to and from depots for fuel, so that we can fuel the whole country, roads under counterpart funding, so that we can pay our share, because we have Exim loans and all of that, so that we can pay our counterpart funding. And fifthly, bridges. Bridges have been damaged during the insurgency. Bridges have deteriorated as a result of lack of maintenance. Bridges have also been damaged as a result of abuse, where people cook under bridges and they catch fire, and so on and so forth. Those were the 6 priorities we submitted. So there's a plan. And suddenly this plan, after we have presented, we have defended it, is all distorted when the budget comes out. So you are now trying to look for where they put what. And so it's really frustrating.
Are you is there likely to be a meeting with the National Assembly leadership to address these issues?
Oh, there have been meetings. There have been meetings, and I think that the acting president has led those meetings. We've met with the leadership of the National Assembly, but one is not sure also. And the leaders of the National Assembly are first amongst equals. They are unlike the executive, where ministers can be given orders. The leaders of the National Assembly are just elected by the members, and I think it's a process of more advocacy and information management and understanding what this is all about.
Okay.
Yes, I was going to take you away from the projects now, and as a layman, how would you explain to the layman the reason for the unending blackouts across country?
I think the easiest way to do that is to say, first of all, we don't have enough power. That's the easiest way, without being technical. It's not enough. So if in one family we have 12 adults, right, and there's only 1 bottle of water, all of us will not get filled if we don't get more water. It just won't be enough. Then there are other problems on the side. So let's just use that bottle of water as an example. So we are trying to get more water so that everybody's thirst can be filled. Now, the process of getting power to us is a production process. They produce it. And currently, we have 2 main sources of power production: gas and hydro. So, if you don't have gas, okay, a major component of producing power is lost. Gas is the fuel that drives the turbines, that activates the electrical side that produces electricity. So, those turbines are like your generator at home. They are just bigger. So that's your I better pass my neighbor. That's what a turbine is. It has an electrical side, it has a mechanical side. That mechanical side is the engine. The engine in your I better pass my neighbor is fuel, petrol. So anytime you don't get petrol, you know that you can't run your generator. Same thing if you don't get gas, you can't run. If you have half tank, it runs. When it runs out, it shuts down. So we don't have enough gas production as well. Where we have gas production, then some people are breaking the gas pipes. So it's like if you have filled your generator with fuel, somebody takes a nail and punctures it. You know, after a while, it will run out of fuel. That's that side. The water side, the hydro, Kainji, Jeba, Shiroro, right, depend on water flow. Water flow is reduced during dry season. So they have to store water in order to manage. So you will see water management and all of that if you visit them. During the rainy season, there is more water. And then they can allow the water to flow because even they have to protect the dam because if there is too much water, it can break the dam. That's why you have during the rainy season, there is more power. But that is also then dependent on maintenance. There can be a lot of water and not necessarily a lot of power if the turbines are not maintained. So, for example, you will recall that immediately after I took office, one of the first places I went to was Jeba to go and commission a replaced turbine. They hadn't maintained that turbine since 1985 when Buhari commissioned that plant as head of state. So it was when these investors came, they started repairing the turbines. So Jeba is increasing the efficiency of his turbines. Kainji is doing the same thing. Shiroro is doing the same thing. So that's the benefit that some privatization has brought because government didn't do it. Government doesn't maintain. Or they didn't maintain. But if you now produce the power, those plants are far away. The power now has to be transported. One thing the ordinary man on the street must know is that power cannot be stored. That's the different thing between power and water. You can skip water and come back and come and use it. Power cannot be stored. Once it's produced, it must be used. So the real revolution of our age will be a way where you can store 1 megawatt of power in a battery and keep it. So you will see people are developing batteries and all of that. That's why you will see that solar systems usually require battery to keep some of the energy because at night there is no sun. Now, the man who has produced power for you using somebody's gas has produced the power. It's your business to go and sell it. So he expects to be paid. The man who has brought the gas has supplied the gas. He expects to be paid. So assuming that I supply petrol to your house for your generator, okay? Then you pour it in. And then your son goes to go and puncture the hole. So you can't produce power from it. Will you tell me that you won't pay me because your son wasted the fuel? So the gas man, after a while, if he doesn't get paid, he will shut down. He won't supply more gas. And I'm coming to how this affects everybody. So when the power is produced, it now has to be transported on those transmission lines. That's the line we call the high tension wire. So let me give you an example. There's a power plant in Lagos called Egmi. It's in Ikorodu. Power from that place, when it's produced, is injected onto the line with a transformer. That line is the line you see crossing the lagoon. The power comes down at Alagbon, near Dolphin. It goes into a substation. So if that transmission line is not working, all the power that Egbe produces, they are entitled to get paid for it. Because they are produced. That transmission line is the one now being managed by government. So again, government must do that line and make sure it's working. So when the power gets to Alagbon, there's a substation there. The substation also has a distribution station. That's now Eco Disco. So the substation now sells the power to the distribution company. Go and supply it to your customers. Government work stops there. Between when you are connecting it from substation to the disco, there can be all sorts of technical problems. Transformers can fail. Just like you had a failure of a transformer at Katankwe in Abuja, about 4 weeks to replace that transformer. We had a problem like that in Alagbon too and many other places. So government is continuously going to replace, because the disco is now the customer of the transmission company to receive power for retail. Again, another example I use is like the breweries. They have produced their product, but not many of them go to the market to go and sell it. They now hand it over to dealers, distributors, go and distribute to customers. So it gets to Teju Show Market, gets to markets around the country. Now, from that point, the distributor is responsible to sell. For him to sell, he needs cable, 33 kV cable, to bring it to your house at 11 kV. He needs transformers to make sure that the power is safe, because the power is coming at 330 kV. It's dangerous power, so they have to step it down. So that's why you now have transformers near your house, in the same way that there are transformers at the substation. Now, if any of those transformers is faulty, at least you know that. You say it has tripped, the transformer has exploded. They need to continuously change those things. They are mechanical things. Just like the fuse in your house can blow. Just like your kettle can explode. Just like your television can refuse to work. They are all mechanical things. So one thing that is important there is, first, they must have the money to replace those parts. Secondly, they must have the maintenance discipline to store some inventory keeping. Now, but that is not the end of the story. Now they give you the power, if they can give it to you, if everything is working. Is there a meter? If there is no meter, then we now have this dispute. No, my estimated bill is too much. If there's a meter, ordinarily there shouldn't be a problem. You know what you are consuming. But when there is no meter, it creates a problem. And that is where the consumers also have a responsibility. A lot of people are using electricity without paying for it. So where there is no meter, some of the things that you see, I'm not saying all, some of the things that you see is that the distributor knows that he has supplied this area. But there are some people behind tapping power. He knows how much power has gone there. But he can only see 10 houses on the street. Maybe somebody inside the house is using a heavy equipment and is not paying for it. But he knows that he has sold power to that place. He looks at 10 houses. He comes to the assumption that, okay, maybe I've supplied 100 kilowatts of energy. He divides it by 10. So you get the estimated billing. So sometimes, not all the time, sometimes in that estimated billing, you are paying for somebody's theft. Because he must recover the money and go and give back to government from whom he bought power. Embed the Nigerian bulk trader, is government. MBET will go away later when we have more power. Discos can buy directly from Gencos. But in order to give stability, they created a bulk trader. To every power producer, we will buy from you. We guarantee that we will pay. That's one contract. It's called power purchase agreements. Then there is another contract called vesting contract. That's the contract by which MBET sells the power to the discos to go and distribute. So there are two different contracts. So the disco must collect all of the power it has received and sold, and then it is paid a part of it. I think they get about 25 or 30%. That's what they should get. So the remaining 75% comes back to MBET. MBET now pays transmission company, pays the generation company, and from there pays the gas company, so that everybody can go and produce more. So on a daily basis, the power is produced. There's a debt in the market if any part fails. On a daily basis. So everybody must play their part. So if at any time, for example, if transmission fails to bring the power, the distribution company too has lost a market because its consumers are waiting for power. So it has planned its operation on the assumption that it will get X thousand megawatt of power. So when you cut the gas line because you are angry, you have created a debt in the system. Because all of them have gone to borrow money, either to replace turbines, to buy transformers, to employ staff, operational capital, on the expectation that there will always be power. So any day that you don't supply power, they are in debt. If the exchange rate suddenly changes, they are in trouble because the basis upon which they have planned has changed. Who covers that gap? If, for example, the generation company, your generator breaks down at home, it's a mechanical part, assuming that something goes wrong, which happens. So gas has come, but you can't turn it into power. That is not the business of the gas man. He must get paid. He has supplied. On that day, it is the Genco that has failed everybody. Because even the transmission man, the government has invested in the lines and is expecting to earn some income for being the transporter. So if you hire me to transport your children to school every day, and I've gone to buy a bus with a bank loan, on the basis of which I will pay every day to the bank, then one day you say your children are gone on holiday and they don't come, you must pay me because I put the bus at your disposal. So this is how the system is designed. I don't want to be unduly longer than this, but these are the real problems. So it's getting everybody to play their part. That is the key.
As Minister of Power now, in a largely privatized environment, what is your job description? Precisely.
The major responsibility I have now is to administer the Electricity Sector Reform Act of 2005, which is as a policy maker, overseer of the industry, and work with the regulator, NEC, to ensure that people play their part. But largely, the referee in the business, who has the power to sanction, to punish, and to do certain things, is NEC. There are still some powers that the minister has. For example, the power to declare eligible customer, the power to develop a rural electrification implementation plan. That ought to have been done since 2006. It wasn't done until I became minister. And that's why you are just seeing us setting up the Rural Electrification Agency. That's a very important agency because we can't cover every part of the country on the grid. There are some places where the communities are so sparse that it is not profitable to build a 330 kV line or 132 kV line to go and serve just a small street like this. It's better to have an independent grid through the rural electrification, and that's what you will see more of happening from later this year and beyond. So a lot of people who are not connected yet will begin to get connected through rural mini grids, extensions, independent projects, and that's why you have us talking about using federal universities as pilots to start rural electrification, because we will use the campus as the base to grow an independent grid for all of the villages around them. Most universities are in rural areas. That's one of the things we want to complete the inherited rural electrification projects. Most of those constituency projects that started since 1999, many of them haven't been finished. We want to complete that. Again, this will affect many communities and bring them access to electricity, independent mostly of the grid.
And this reminds me of some things that I've heard from people in terms of policy, that can the government have a policy in which if you generate power in Lagos State, for instance, you don't need to send it to the national grid. Take care, every region or every state taking care of itself. Instead of everybody generating power and sending it to Oshogbo, and Oshogbo beginning to decide where to send it.
No, let me correct that impression. I used to have that impression before, but that impression is not correct. The power is not sent to Oshogbo. Oshogbo is the coordination center that allocates, that decides the allocation to DISCO. Because all of the states, the communities, the local governments have different energy capacities and demands. The load demand, for example, for Lagos is higher than the load demand for Abuja. Abuja is probably higher than some other cities or states, and without getting into any final details. So what we have, therefore, is that the total energy produced is like a pie chart. Abuja DISCO gets 11% of whatever energy is on the grid, based on population and so many other these things. So what NCC does is to coordinate the delivery through different centers. I've told you now that the Egmi line, right, goes to Alagmo. It also goes to Ikeja West at what's this place? Ayobo. Okay, and it goes to Republic of Benin. From Geregu in Kogi, for example, it goes to Abuja. Through Lokoja comes to Abuja to feed the FCT, feed Nasarawa, and so. So it's not that all the lines go to Oshogbo, but there is communication. There is an equipment called SCADA. SCADA, for coordinating. It's like intelligence monitoring of what is happening on every grid. It's an electronic and IT. Now, the SCADA is not fully functional. The SCADA that was supplied, that I met, is not fully functional. So we're trying to get them. And that is when you can see everything real time from Oshogbo, what is going on all, because everybody is communicating with one another. Now, with regard to your response, the privatization allows everybody now to generate their own power subject to a licensing regime. There's a licensing regime. I think below 1 megawatt, you can do your own independent beyond that, you need to apply for certain types of licenses from NEC, and they will issue you a license to then, under conditions, to know what kind of energy you are doing. Because again, there's a policy for safe energy. So we need to know how you are generating, the environmental impact, where, and all of that. So those are the things that we are responsible for. And also, as the whole world is going towards renewable, my job as minister is to formulate policies for government that allows everybody to play in the renewable market. So one of the things we've done is to develop an energy mix for Nigeria, which we presented at our National Council on Power last year. And that energy mix now helps us to target a 30% renewable by 2030 of all our total electricity capacity. Within that, we are also looking at getting some more coal onto the electricity mix, getting more hydro, getting some wind, getting solar, because we have been too dependent on hydro and gas. But as I've shown you, hydro has its own limitations when it is dry season. Gas has its own limitations because of the dependence of gas on hydrocarbons, which again are environmentally challenging, and also because of the vulnerability in this part of the gas pipelines to criminal actions and even pressure failures. Solar has its own limitation too. At night is not as prolific, and the downside of it also is that it requires a lot of space. So you need more farmlands or land that you probably use for housing, for energy. Each type of coal has its own ecological and environmental issues. So what all the countries across the world have done is to strike a balance of an energy mix, so that seasonally you're able to move from one area of strength to another area of strength.
Okay, yes. You mentioned eligible consumers the other time. And in the old discussion, in the old conversation, some people have accused you of siding the Gencos. What would you say to that?
Well, in my role as minister, I will be accused of siding all sides. Even within the cabinet, I've been accused of siding the discos. When tariff was increased, I was accused of siding the discos when I spoke in favor of tariff last year, and everybody wanted to chop off my head. But very few people remember that I didn't fix the tariff. I just expressed support for it. It was NEC that fixed the tariff, because the minister can't fix tariff. NEC itself doesn't fix tariff. It approves tariff recommended by the discos based on certain market dynamics that change. So, in this kind of job, you are accused of all sorts. But the reason I've been accused of siding the Gencos is because they are at least more efficient in their own side. Their turbines are working, they are investing, and they are not getting paid. So it must be a sensible person who sees that, look, the side from where the product is coming, that is functioning, must not be allowed to die. Otherwise, there will really be nothing to distribute or to transport. So what did we do? We saw that the money that should be coming in from the discos to pay the Gencos and to pay the gas company was not coming in because of many factors: exchange rate, pipe breakdowns, inefficiencies by the discos themselves, lack of capital, so many reasons. Nothing the total fault of the discos alone. But for some reason, the money is not coming in. The Gencos are still producing some power. No matter how poor you think it is, there's still some power. And they don't get paid. And we said, okay, let us ring-fence the old debts. Let us stabilize going forward and create a payment guarantee. And so we went to council to ask for a loan to MBET, which is a government-owned company that is the guaranteed purchaser, so that it can discharge its obligations to the Gencos. because it buys that power from the Genco but doesn't fully pay because it hasn't received the money from the discos. But there are two different contracts. So the fact that you haven't received your money from the discos is no defense to paying the Gencos. It's not a defense. So we created a payment assurance guarantee. We think that the privatization is still growing, is still evolving, is in transition. So we think within another 2 years, this time in December 2018, so we took January to December 2018, 2 years. How much are we likely to owe them, given the shortfall we are seeing from the discos? And it came to roughly about 701 billion. And that includes the performance improvement we want to see based on the policies we had agreed to implement under the Power Sector Recovery Program. And we said, okay, we will borrow this money so that if anytime we get 30 naira instead of 100 naira from the discos, we will borrow 70 naira to make up the difference. But by next payment, we want that 70 naira we borrowed to have reduced to 65 naira because we expect the discos to have increased collection to 35 naira because there are certain policies we are planning to implement. And we expect that to go down. So it's not a 701 billion naira kept in one bank. It's a program to assure that every month we can borrow the difference to pay. So the discos have accused me of not doing enough, but they failed, as I said in Jos, to tell the public that they also are beneficiaries of a central bank loan that was approved before I came. But the conditions for getting that loan included an escrow of their accounts and the opening of certain letters of credit, which can be called if they default. They didn't want that, but they wanted the money. So instead of doing that, they now went to court. But they didn't tell the public that they went to court. But the public, as you are seeking here, will not understand why the nation is suddenly in darkness and all of these technical things. So the whole idea behind that payment assurance was to secure continued production of power while we are curing the defects in distribution. So let us go back to our breweries as our example. If the distributors of the products are not recovering the money, will the breweries shut down? They will continue to produce and find other means to then collect back, which is exactly what we are trying to do here.
But I understand, sir, that 10 out of 11 discos have declared a force majeure based on the eligible consumer thing. And then they cannot come. Now, what would the government do? Are we going to be national?
I haven't been officially notified of a declaration of force majeure. I haven't been officially notified. That's one. Two, we met in Uguaji, in Enugu, on Monday. None of them raised the issue of force majeure. They expressed concerns about the eligible customer, but I explained to them that they were seeing the declaration only from the revenue side. Now, what is eligible customer, really and truly? Because I've told them that if they articulate their position, then I will respond. But to simply say, oh, it's going to reduce our revenue, that's not it. I am seeing it from the service side. And that's part of my job as minister, to provide service to Nigerians by ensuring that those who are now private owners of that service do what they are contracted to do. Eligible customers simply means that certain classes of customers who consume a lot of power, and we have categorized them, they are not getting service from their discos because either the transformer is bad, the feeder is bad, and the disco can't repair it.
Load rejection too.
And that is what then leads to load rejection. Now you then begin to wonder, why are they rejecting load that we say is not enough? It's because they don't have the money to repair the equipment that will feed that customer. So that customer is suffering. He wants power. So the only reason why he can't get power is that the disco doesn't have the money to repair that equipment. Now, that customer now says, can I use my money to build this distribution facility and take my power directly from the Genco? Because the disco can't build it. Why should any responsible government say no to that? You can't supply a service because your equipment is bad or is not there. Somebody now wants to go and get it by himself, and you say it will reduce your revenue. If it is so important to your revenue, then go and replace it. So there will be no eligible customer if the discos perform. That's the reverse of it. So right now, what has happened is that NEC is the one to now implement the policy. And NEC is not going to do it without consulting with them. So all of these agitations are really neither here nor there at this moment. Now, as far as revenue is concerned, right, I think that they want to continue to bill people for service they didn't provide. We won't allow that. So there can't be a secured revenue for a service you haven't provided. If you understand me. So you must go and provide that service and then earn the revenue. Otherwise, why are you complaining about the revenue? Everybody is looking for customers. So there's a customer waiting and saying, give me power, give me power. You are not giving him. He says, okay, I'm going to go and buy my own power. You say, no, it will reduce my revenue if you buy your power. What kind of provider are you? That is one. There is an inherent opportunity here. Very, very interesting opportunity for disaggregated tariffs without creating any problem to the poor and to the vulnerable. Because the person who can build his own disco is going to build it at a cost. For him to use that disco, he must still pay some revenues to you because it's in your territory. So he's paying for premium. And in this way, all of the tariff reviews that you are trying to get, you automatically get it without necessarily raising everybody's tariff. Because you have a premium customer who is now able to say, look, I will build my own network. They will charge me 40 naira per kilowatt hour. It is higher than 25 naira, which is the public tariff. But it is cheaper than 60 naira, which is the cost of generating with diesel. So why are you standing in the way of that? So we already have steel companies who consume up to 50 megawatts already applying to be eligible customer. So state governments can be eligible customer. I was eligible customer as Lagos State Governor because the whole of Alausa, I took off the grid and built my own power. But we were paying a higher tariff than NEPA tariff. And in this way, it will then free up the remaining power to your regular consumers. And it will also create a class of consumers who want dedicated power and who are ready to pay a premium for it. But during the consultations with NEC, they will understand it better. I think what you are seeing is just a knee-jerk reaction to guaranteed income without necessarily providing the service. Now, if you don't want me to be eligible customer, give me the service. Why should I want to take more expensive power when you can give me at a certain lower tariff that you control. So it's an argument really that in my view goes nowhere. We have seen, for example, a power producing company in Isolo. They are licensed to produce 20 megawatt of power. They are producing 14, but they only have customers for 6 and for 8. So they have 6 megawatt there, nobody to take it, because they can't sell it at the grid price, because they are buying gas, I think, at $7 per million scf. So their power is premium power, just like my IPPs then, but it's effective. So we have 6 factories in Isolo who are saying, we will take power from these people if you approve eligible customer for us. Aha. So those people have applied and have sent it to NEC. Go and evaluate it. They want to lay a distribution line of about 2 kilometers and connect 6 industries. And the industries are saying, we want power, we want power. If the industries have power, it means more productivity, it means more employment.
Yes, you wanted to ask a question on metering. That would be the last question.
Yes. The question: Nigerians are not getting prepaid meters, and we're wondering. So people would say perhaps there are some cabals that don't want people to get meters. We're hearing that perhaps the government, at one point, the government wanted to give out prepaid meters free to people, and the government must have given awarded contracts for people to. So what's the problem? Is it that people are not, those contractors are not supplying the meters? Is it that is the cabal at work? Or
there's no cabal. It's a long story, but we're almost there. We're close. The people who should provide meters are the discos. It's part of their licensing agreement. And they should provide it free, because it is their measuring device for calculating how much to bill you. That is why when they couldn't do it, government allowed them to do a credit applied metering scheme, CAPME, where you advance money to provide a meter they should have provided, and then you defray the cost from your bill. But even that, when they collected your money, they didn't supply the meter within, I think, 45 or 60 days. It became a very, very serious issue, and I said, wind it down. It's bad enough that consumers don't have meter that you should supply. It's worse that you now collect people's money and don't give them what they have paid for. So stop it, because the complaints are coming to me. They are not coming to you. And you go and provide it. Of course, their finances are in some challenging situation they can't raise, because there is a credit provided by the French Development Agency for them to acquire meters. The interest rate is a lot better than 20-something% in the commercial rate. But their books can't just take loans. They're bad. Many of them. But let me say to you that I inherited a metering program. That itself is the subject of so many stories. But, but we are trying to resolve it. It was a contract awarded in 2003 by NEPA to supply, I think, about 3 million meters for 37 billion naira. That contract has not been performed till today, 14 years after. The money is in a bank. There have been court cases around it, but we are trying to solve it. We're very close. When we solve it, we will announce what has happened. But it is unlikely that we will now get the same number of meters because certain things have changed. But we're trying to work a situation where, and then how we then create a metering program that can then get into the discourse and how we account for it as part of the portfolio of assets within the shareholding that the federal government has in the discourse. So there's a lot of work to be done. But it's first to even settle with the contractor and then get a plan for how many meters will come in before we start going to tidy. But in closing, I just want to say that privatization has succeeded in many countries. It has succeeded in China, it has succeeded in India, it has succeeded in Mexico, it has succeeded in South Africa, it has succeeded in Brazil. They haven't succeeded wholly without some government support, whether you want to call it subsidy or whatever. But they have led to improved power production. What has been problematic here is that the privatization was delayed for 8 years after the law was passed. That was a problem. So we should have gained a lot of time. Because we did the telecoms in 2002. On the back of passing that law in 2005, we should quickly have done this. But you know there were all sorts of resistance, PSCN staff, strike, protest, court case, everything took 8 years. We lost time. Secondly, it was done with, quote, some lack of honesty with Nigerians. Because it was done in the heat of politics. And it created the impression to Nigerians that once they just privatized, everything was going to be fine. It didn't tell Nigerians that there was bad equipment that needed to be fixed, meters to be installed, a metering program, and all of the work that needs to be done. So it created expectation that was unreal. It didn't build our mind for a transition period, which is what we are really true in. We're in a transition period. Just as we were in a transition period during the telecoms. We went through many transitions. We are still in transition. There are still parts of Nigeria where you still can't talk. There are still some people who still cannot afford to buy a phone today. They are going to buy their phone tomorrow. There was a time when you could only pay per minute. We evolved to per second. So this is part of that transition. So if all of this had been told to Nigerians, they would have understood better. So these are all of the gaps that our power sector recovery program is now trying to re-engineer backwards and solve. So when we finish what we are doing, we will unveil that program, the details to Nigerians. It is my intention to break it into the major languages so that everybody really understands what we have to do. Because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Even in places where they want to install meters, people resist. We have reports of people being macheted while trying to install meters. Photographs. So yes, some people want meters. Some people don't want it. So we need an anti-energy theft law. A very rigorous one. In some countries, there is no option of fine. You go to jail. We need to also conserve energy because what is wasted will never be enough. There is no state that I have visited in the morning where I don't see people putting on light bulbs outside the house at 11 a.m. during the day. What are you lighting outside? So it suggests that those people are not paying for their energy. So there is the citizen side of it as well. But all told, I am optimistic that we will solve the problem because a lot of Nigerians are beginning to get involved. This is becoming a very important issue for everybody. We now understand it. We haven't paid as much attention to it, perhaps, as we are now. And I know that when Nigerians pay attention to something, they win. I know that. So I'll stop there.
So, well, finally for me, so what are we having? Uninterrupted power supply.
Uninterrupted power supply is not an event, it's a journey. The first is incremental energy. As we get incremental energy, our electricity experience will get better. As our electricity experience gets better, we go to steady power. Steady power means that you have enough because you know how many people need power. Today we don't. We don't have the sensors of our energy demand. Everybody is estimating it by mouth. So that's not a number to plan for. And every investment that you make has to be accounted for because it reflects in tariff. Because the law says you must recover every investment. So if you overcapacitate, you will overpay. So you just have to right size and get it right. So it's like if you run a media house and you need only 2 cameras and you go and buy 10, your cost of operation will put you out of business. Yeah. So that's the road to steady power. So we need the sensors first to even get to steady power. But incremental energy experience will relieve us. It's a journey, so it's not an event.